The stars outside the dome of Varaxis shimmered cold and distant as Captain Leora Kinsley sat alone at the edge of the diplomatic hall, her uniform stiff and sharp, but her jaw clenched tight. Around her, representatives from over 20 alien civilizations mingled, drank, and exchanged hollow words of unity, but she could feel the underlying tension crackling in the air like static. No one spoke to her. They rarely did. Humans were new, weak, barely tolerated in the grand scheme of the galactic concord, and everyone in that room thought her presence was just a courtesy, not a necessity. Lyora's eyes scanned the holograms floating above the table in the center of the room, war projections, planetary reports, population heat maps, all of them focused on one single growing threat, the Thalzar Empire. A violent, expansionist race of reptilian giants. The Thalzar had already burned 3 border systems in the past 6 months, and now they were coming for Earth. When the Concord's leader, High Executor Nares, a tall avian elder with silver feathers and a hollow tone, declared that Earth was strategically irrelevant and that defending it would waste resources, Lyora's blood turned to ice. She stood up, her voice sharp and clear, breaking the silent dismissal that followed his speech, and said, "So you'll leave billions to die because we don't matter to your maps?" The hall went silent, then rippled with murmurs and polite disapproval. The Sinar diplomat, a translucent being with a liquid voice, said what many were thinking. "Your kind is too fragile for this war. You should evacuate and pray the Thalzar pass you by." Leora didn't respond. She just walked out of the chamber, her heart pounding, not with fear, but fury, because she knew something they didn't. Earth had been building something in secret. For 50 years, under the radar of the Concord, humanity's brightest minds had worked in the black, hidden from scanners and spies, creating the one thing that could change everything. She boarded her shuttle without a word and activated the deep channel comms buried in its core. With shaking fingers, she entered the encrypted code that hadn't been used since her academy days. "Project Silhouette is green." The message vanished into the void. Hours later, her outpost at Station Alara, just off Jupiter's orbit, went silent. Not destroyed, just gone. No alarms, no signals, no wreckage. It simply disappeared. Panic spread through human colonies and Concord monitors alike, but no one could explain it. Except Lyora. As her shuttle drifted beyond Mars, cloaked in electromagnetic silence, a rift opened in the blackness of space. From nothingness, a shape emerged, dark, massive, and impossible to see unless you knew exactly where to look. The lights of her shuttle blinked as the ship recognized a hidden beacon, and then the veil dropped for just a second. There it was. Humanity's invisible fortress. A city among stars, hidden with quantum refraction tech, cloaked by gravimetric lenses, completely undetectable unless it chose to reveal itself. They called it Haven. She docked in silence, stepping into its clean metal corridors as technicians, engineers, and officers snapped to attention. She passed rows of unmanned drones with smooth black armor, silent launch bays humming with potential energy, and war rooms lined with pulse maps and deep space scanners. She had come home. Dr. Marcus Drev, the man behind the city's construction, met her in the command center. "They're not going to help us," Lyora said, without waiting for him to speak. He nodded grimly. "Then we don't wait for them. We begin now." Over the next hours, Haven's systems came online. Engines hummed, weapons primed, and its deep cloak held firm as they moved into position between Earth and the Thalzar invasion route. No Concord sensors would pick them up. No Thalzar eyes would see them coming. The city was more than a shield. It was a sword waiting in silence. On Earth, leaders gathered in bunkers, broadcasting pleas for help to the Concord. None were answered. As the first wave of Thalzar warships entered the solar system, confidence in their overwhelming firepower made them careless. But they didn't know that something was watching, something human. One ship vanished. Then another. No weapons were seen. No impact detected. The Thalzar scanners showed empty space, yet their fleet began shrinking ship by ship. Panic set in. They scrambled to locate the attacker, but there was nothing to find. In their arrogance, they had never imagined a species they considered primitive could master stealth warfare beyond their understanding. Inside Haven, Lyora stood before the observation window, the darkness of space before her, and behind her, the silent might of a city that wasn't supposed to exist. She didn't smile. Not yet. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had called humans weak. They would learn in time just how wrong they were. In the quiet depths of space, far from the eyes of the galactic Concord, the invisible city known as Haven hummed with a quiet but deadly energy, a beacon of human resilience and silent power in a galaxy that had long dismissed them as weak. Captain Lyora Kinsley stood on the command deck, eyes sharp and unwavering, watching the pulse of the Thalzar fleet as it scrambled to understand the new threat that had struck without warning or mercy. The fleet was smaller now, shattered by precise and silent strikes from humanity's stealth drones, machines crafted in secret for years to carry out surgical attacks on enemy supply lines and command centers. These drones moved like ghosts through the void, striking before the Thalzar could even raise their shields, disappearing before a response could form. The galaxy had begun to whisper about the ghost fleet, ships that appeared suddenly, delivered deadly blows, and vanished without a trace, leaving no bodies, no battle scars, only echoes of steel in empty space. Meanwhile, aboard Haven, Lyora worked tirelessly, assembling an unusual group outcasts from various alien species. Smugglers rejected by the Concord, engineers whose talents had been wasted by the big powers. She offered them something they had never had before: purpose and a place to fight back against the Thalzar Empire. These allies brought with them strange and powerful knowledge, strange weapons and tactics that mixed with humanity's own ingenuity to create a force unlike any other. In the war rooms of Haven, strategies were drawn and redrawn on glowing screens, new plans born from desperation and hope. But the threat was growing. The Sire of Glass, an ancient psychic tracker summoned by the Thalzar warlords, searched relentlessly for the invisible city. Its mind pierced through shadows and cloaks, forcing Haven's defenses to strain against the psychic pressure that threatened to reveal its location. Lyora knew the danger was not only from the physical world, but from the mind itself. The Sire's power was terrifying, able to crack the strongest shields and tear through mental walls. Yet, Haven stood firm. Its crew worked in perfect synchronization, each member a vital part of the whole, their resolve as unbreakable as the steel of their city. The battle that followed was unlike any other, a war fought not with roaring cannons and blazing lasers, but with silent drones and psychic warfare in the cold expanse where even sound could not travel. Human pilots flew daring sorties, weaving through enemy lines, striking at key points, and retreating before the Thalzar could respond. Meanwhile, Lyora sent out signals to colonies under siege, coordinating resistance and turning scattered rebellions into a united front. The alliance grew stronger, and the tides of war shifted as species long ignored by the Concord rose up, inspired by humanity's courage and cleverness. But the Sire of Glass was relentless. In one terrible moment, it unleashed a psychic wave that shook Haven to its core, flickering its cloak and causing alarms to scream across the city. The crew fought to keep the city hidden, to keep hope alive. Lyora herself stood at the heart of the storm, pushing her mind beyond fear, guiding her people through the darkest hour. And in that moment of near disaster, the invisible city proved what humanity had known all along. Weakness was a lie, a story told by those afraid of the unknown. With steely resolve, Haven launched a bold counterattack, sending their most skilled pilots and deadliest drones into the fray. The battle was fierce, shadows clashing against shadows, light against dark, but humanity's secret weapon held fast. And as the Thalzar struggled to adapt, to fight an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere, whispers spread through the stars about the strength of those they called weak, and the invisible city that refused to fall. The cold void of space stretched endlessly as the Thalzar fleet finally closed in on Haven, the invisible city that had haunted their warships and shattered their confidence, forcing them to confront a foe they had never expected, humanity, hidden and stronger than anyone could have guessed. For weeks, the city had remained out of reach, cloaked in shadows, striking and fading like a phantom. But now the relentless pressure of the enemy's search had forced the veil to lift. Sensors flickered, and the vast ships of the Thalzar encircled the city, their weapons locked and ready, their sharp eyes filled with anger and fear. Captain Lyora Kinsley stood in the command center, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her like a heavy fog. The crew worked around her, their faces tight with focus and determination, knowing that the battle ahead would decide the fate of humanity and their new allies. The city's cloaking systems strained, flickering under the psychic assault of the Sire of Glass, the ancient tracker that had hunted them through the stars. The Sire's psychic waves hammered at the shields, trying to tear apart the invisibility that had protected them for so long. Lyora ordered every available resource to reinforce the cloak and power the city's defenses. Engineers and scientists worked frantically, rerouting energy, pushing systems beyond their normal limits. Outside, the Thalzar warships advanced with brutal precision, launching waves of missile strikes and energy blasts designed to pierce the city's armor. Drones scrambled from launch bays, darting into the assault to intercept enemy fire and disrupt the attackers. But they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. The walls of Haven groaned as impacts hammered the shields and rippled through the metal framework. With every strike, the city edged closer to exposure, to destruction. In the midst of this siege, Lyora made a decision that shocked even her closest advisors. She called for the activation of the Ether Core, a secret weapon hidden deep within Haven's core, a device designed not to defend but to destroy, a dimensional disruptor that could fold space itself and erase entire fleets from existence. The risk was enormous. Powering the core would drain every system, endanger the lives of everyone aboard, and potentially destroy Haven itself if it failed. But Lyora knew that survival depended on victory here and now. As the Thalzar fleet tightened their grip, the Aether Core began to hum with raw energy, its power feeding on every system in the city. Alarms blared, warning of overloads and critical failures, but the command center held steady. Lyora's voice cut through the chaos, clear and firm, rallying her people for the final stand. Outside, the battle raged like a storm. Ships collided with blasts of light and shuddering shockwaves, but none dared close in for fear of the unseen weapon lurking within haven. The drone pilots wove deadly patterns, striking at the enemy's weakest points, buying precious time as the core's charge grew. Seconds ticked by like hours as the power reached critical levels. The city trembled, metal groaning under the strain of the immense energy flowing through its veins. Then, with a flash that lit the darkness like a new star, the ether core unleashed its terrible might. Space itself twisted and folded in on the Thalzar fleet. Entire squadrons vanished in blinding waves of energy, their ships erased from existence without a trace. The survivors scattered in panic, breaking formation, their confidence shattered. The tide had turned in an instant, but victory came at a cost. Haven's systems faltered under the strain, life support flickered, and the city drifted, damaged and vulnerable. The crew worked desperately to stabilize the ship, to repair the wounds inflicted by their own weapon. Yet even as they fought to survive, the Sire of Glass remained unbroken and unyielding. Its psychic presence loomed over the battlefield, a reminder that the war was far from over. Captain Leora Kensley looked out at the stars, knowing that this siege was only the beginning of a longer, harder fight. The invisible city had struck the first great blow, but to protect humanity's future, they would have to endure many more battles in the cold silence of space. The galaxy was watching, and the name human was no longer a word to be dismissed. It was a challenge, a warning, and above all, a promise. The wreckage of the Thalzar fleet scattered like fallen leaves across the dark emptiness where Haven drifted, wounded but alive, its battered hull glowing faintly under the distant light of the sun as Captain Leora Kensley stood before the observation window, her eyes scanning the silent stars. Beyond, knowing this was no quiet after the storm but the start of a new war, the galaxy had finally seen the truth hidden in humanity's strength and cunning, a truth carved from years of quiet endurance and secret preparation. The invisible city had revealed humanity, not as weak prey, but as a force to be reckoned with, and now every star held the echo of their name, whispered in awe and fear by species who once sneered at their fragility. Lyora felt the weight. All those who had fallen, all who had fought beside her, and those still counting on them, the humans, the outcasts, the allies who had rallied behind a cause that once seemed hopeless, and as the ship's systems groaned in their slow recovery, the command center filled with a quiet determination. Engineers and officers working tirelessly to restore Haven's strength, knowing they could not afford a moment's weakness because the Thalzar were regrouping, gathering their scattered forces for a counterattack that would be fiercer and more desperate than anything yet faced. Messages came in from distant colonies, some broken and scared, others emboldened by the news of Haven's defiance, calling for reinforcements and supplies, and Lyora ordered every ship ready to fly to move to Earth's defense, knowing that their survival depended not just on technology, but on the unyielding spirit that had brought them this far. The galactic Concord, shaken by the unexpected turn, sent envoys with cautious offers of aid, but it was clear that trust was fragile, and their motives unclear. Humanity had been pushed too long into the shadows to accept help without suspicion. Yet the war had become a shared fight, and new alliances were forged from necessity and respect. Amid this turmoil, the greatest challenge remained the Sire of Glass, the psychic hunter that had pursued them through darkness and shadow. And despite Haven's victories, its presence weighed like a shadow on the crew's minds, a reminder that this enemy was not only physical, but mental, capable of breaking minds as easily as ships. Laura herself confronted the threat by gathering her closest allies in the silent halls, where they devised a plan that relied on trust, sacrifice, and the rarest weapon hope. They would send a team led by their best pilots, including humans and their alien allies, on a dangerous mission deep into the heart of the Thalzar command, using cloaked fighters and stealth tactics to strike at the source of the psychic power. Hoping to sever the connection that gave the Sire its strength. The days before the mission were tense, filled with quiet farewells, whispered prayers, and the hum of preparations as the team checked and rechecked their gear, knowing the odds were against them, but driven by the same fierce determination that had built Haven in secret. When the ship slipped through the dark veil of space, silent and unseen, Lyora watched from the command center, her heart heavy with the weight of hope and fear intertwined, as the team vanished into the stars to face an enemy who had hunted them like shadows hunt the light. The mission's success would mean freedom, a chance to turn the tide forever, but failure would spell doom for humanity's last sanctuary. Days passed with agonizing slowness until the comms finally flickered alive, the team reporting back that they had found the psychic core deep within the enemy's fortress, guarded by ancient technologies and fierce warriors loyal to the Sire. The battle that followed was brutal and swift, a clash of wills and steel that tested every ounce of courage and skill. With the combined might of human and alien fighters, the psychic core was destroyed, severing the Sire's connection and weakening its hold on the battlefield. Back on Haven, relief swept through the crew as the psychic assault ceased. The city's cloak stabilized, and a new dawn broke across the stars. The victory was hard-earned and far from the end, but it carved a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The story of a species once dismissed, now rising with unbreakable spirit and fierce pride. Captain Lyora Kinsley stood before her crew and allies, her voice steady and proud as she declared that the name human would no longer be forgotten or mocked, but remembered as a symbol of strength, hope, and unyielding resolve. They had fought from the shadows, hidden in silence, but now they would shine among the stars, a new power in the galaxy, and the name they carved into the cosmos was theirs to own forever.